the study that watched men die on purpose. In 1932, the United States Public Health Service launched a medical study in Tuskegee, Alabama. They recruited 399 black men who had syphilis and told them they were receiving treatment for bad blood, a local term for a range of ailments. The men were poor sharecroppers who had little access to health care. They trusted the doctors. They were not being treated. The real purpose of the study was to observe what happened to the human body when syphilis was left completely untreated. The men were given placebos, vitamins, aspirin, but they were never given the actual medicine that could have saved them. Then, in 1947, penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis. It was widely available. It was cheap and it worked. The doctors running the study knew this. They chose not to give it to the men anyway. The study continued for another 25 years. By the time a whistleblower named Peter Buxton leaked the story to the press in 1972, 28 men had died directly from syphilis. 100 more had died from related complications, 40 wives had been infected, and 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis. The men had never been told the truth about what was being done to them. The government did not apologize until 1997, 65 years after the study began. The government that poisoned its own alcohol supply. During Prohibition in the 1920s, the United States government made alcohol illegal, but Americans kept drinking anyway. Bootleggers found a workaround by stealing industrial alcohol, which was used in manufacturing, and converting it into drinkable liquor. The government's response was not what most people would expect. Federal officials ordered manufacturers of industrial alcohol to add increasingly dangerous poisons to their products. The idea was that if the bootleggers couldn't make the alcohol safe to drink, people would stop buying it. The poisons included methanol, kerosene, and other toxic chemicals specifically chosen to make the alcohol deadly. The bootleggers kept selling it anyway, and people kept drinking it. By the time Prohibition ended in 1933, historians estimate that the government's deliberate poisoning program had killed more than 10,000 Americans. The people who died were not criminals. They were ordinary citizens who had no idea that the drink in their hand had been intentionally contaminated by their own government. The government that planned to bomb its own people. In 1962, a document was drafted inside the United States Department of Defense. It was stamped top secret, signed by the highest-ranking military officers in the country, and delivered directly to the Secretary of Defense. It sat buried in a classified vault for 35 years. When it was finally declassified in 1997, people could barely believe what they were reading. The document was called Operation Northwoods. It was a proposal from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, America's most senior military leadership, to stage a series of fake terrorist attacks on American soil. The plan included bombing civilian targets in Miami and Washington, sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees, hijacking commercial airplanes, and even blowing up a drone aircraft painted to look like a real passenger jet. The goal was to blame all of it on Cuba, manufacture public outrage, and use that outrage to justify a full-scale military invasion. The plan was not written by a rogue agent or a fringe group. It was signed by General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and formally submitted to the Secretary of Defense on March 13, 1962. President Kennedy rejected it. Lemnitzer was quietly reassigned to a NATO command shortly afterward. The document was locked away and stayed forgotten until 1997, when the JFK Assassination Records Review Board released a massive batch of declassified government files. Researchers going through the documents found the Northwoods proposal sitting there in plain language. Just a detailed, signed plan from America's top generals to kill American civilians to start a war. The tobacco companies that knew. For decades, the tobacco industry told the public the same thing. Cigarettes were not proven to cause cancer. Nicotine was not addictive. The science was unclear. Doctors even appeared in advertisements recommending specific cigarette brands. Meanwhile, inside the companies, a very different conversation was happening. Internal research conducted by tobacco companies as early as the 1950s showed a clear link between smoking and lung cancer. Their own scientists had confirmed it. Their own documents proved they understood that nicotine was addictive and that their products were killing people. They buried it. Instead of coming forward, the major tobacco companies launched coordinated campaigns to cast doubt on the science, fund misleading research, and keep the public confused for as long as possible. In 1994, the CEOs of 7 major tobacco companies sat before Congress. raised their right hands, and testified under oath that they believed nicotine was not addictive. Their own internal memos said the opposite. The truth came out in the late 1990s through a series of massive lawsuits that forced the companies to release millions of pages of internal documents. Those documents showed that the industry had known about the health risks for decades and had deliberately hidden them from the public. The CIA that drugged its own citizens. In the early 1950s, the United States government was terrified of something. American soldiers returning from the Korean War were behaving strangely. Some were confessing to war crimes they hadn't committed. Others were refusing to come home at all. Intelligence officials became convinced that the Soviet Union had developed some kind of mind control technique, and they were determined to figure out how it worked. So the CIA started its own program to find out. On April 13, 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized a top-secret project called MK-Ultra. The stated goal was to develop methods of behavior modification that could be used against enemy agents. What actually happened was something far more disturbing. Over the next 20 years, the CIA secretly dosed thousands of people with LSD and other powerful drugs without their knowledge or consent. The subjects included mental hospital patients, prison inmates, military personnel, and ordinary civilians who had no idea what was happening to them. The experiments were carried out at more than 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons, many of which had no idea they were being used as CIA front organizations. One of the most notorious operations was called Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York City, hired prostitutes to lure men inside, and secretly dosed them with LSD while federal agents watched from behind two-way mirrors and recorded what happened. In 1953, an Army scientist named Frank Olson was secretly given LSD at a CIA meeting in a Maryland cabin. Days later, he fell from the 10th floor of a New York hotel. His death was ruled a suicide. His family was never told the truth. When CIA Director Richard Helms realized the program was about to be exposed in 1973, he ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed. Most of them were, but in 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a cache of 20,000 documents that had been misfiled and missed the shredding order. Those documents led to Senate hearings, and the full story finally came out. The program and the experiments were real. And for 20 years, the United States government had been secretly running one of the largest unauthorized human experimentation programs in history. The time nuclear bombs almost detonated by accident. During the Cold War, the United States kept nuclear bombers in the air almost constantly, ready to strike at any moment. But this created a serious problem: accidents. These incidents became known as broken arrow events. Situations where nuclear weapons were lost, dropped, or nearly detonated by mistake. One of the most dangerous happened in 1961 over Goldsboro, North Carolina. A B-52 bomber broke apart midair. It was carrying 2 nuclear bombs, each one more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. As the aircraft fell apart, both bombs were released. One of them went through most of its arming sequence. Out of multiple safety mechanisms, only a single low-voltage safety switch prevented detonation. If that switch had failed, it could have caused massive destruction across the region. The public wasn't told the full story at the time. Details only came out decades later through declassified documents. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't war. It was a near catastrophe that almost happened by accident. The FBI that tried to destroy civil rights leaders. In the 1950s and 60s, the FBI launched a secret program called COINTELPRO. Its purpose wasn't just surveillance, it was disruption. The FBI targeted civil rights groups, anti-war activists, and political organizations they saw as threats. That included figures like Martin Luther King Jr. Agents wiretapped phones, infiltrated organizations, spread false rumors, and worked to turn members against each other. But it didn't stop there. In 1964, the FBI anonymously sent Martin Luther King Jr. a letter, along with recordings taken from his private life. The letter strongly implied he should take his own life before his secrets were exposed. It wasn't signed, but it came from inside the FBI. For years, the program remained hidden, until 1971, when a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Pennsylvania and stole classified documents. They sent them to the press. That's when the public first learned about COINTELPRO, a confirmed government program designed not just to watch citizens, but to discredit and disrupt them.